it provides any person that is coming into contact with this or that solution in the logistics space, simply makes it easier to compare, to understand analogies, parallel approaches, or consolidated approaches. And we have a lot of customers using solutions like Pick by Voice, Pick by Light. Some even refer to Pick by Scan. It's not that common, but in that sense, to me, it makes much more sense to think of it as Pick by Vision.
James, here we are again, another episode of Go HandsFree. I believe this is episode 7, is that right?
Number 7, lucky number 7? I don't know.
Well, hopefully. It was a really good episode, so I could class it as lucky. Today we are talking to Helmar Matheis, who's a senior product manager at TeamViewer and does lots of cool stuff on smart glasses. So, I don't know, James, do you give us a bit more background?
Yeah, so we've worked with Helmar for quite a while, George, as you know, and senior product manager at TeamViewer. He runs the X-Pick product at TeamViewer, which is a great use case for hands-free wearables, vision picking, people in warehouses. So an amazing use case for a hands-free device. So yeah, we spoke to Helmar about all things to do with vision picking. So let's get into it.
Okay. Welcome to another Go HandsFree with me and James. Today we're delighted to have Helmar Matheis from TeamViewer with us. Helmar, thank you so much for coming on the pod. Looking forward to going very deep on some very interesting topics around vision picking and some of the work you're doing with HandsFree. But before we do that, could you give us a bit of background on how you came to be in the position you find yourself today?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. So I joined TeamViewer a little over a year ago as the product manager for our logistics solution in Frontline. Before that, I've been with Amazon for a little over 14 years, mostly in the business process automation space, with our communication with vendors, manufacturers, wholesalers, etc. How we basically get our product into our warehouses and at times also out, like drop shipping, and then automating all of that at scale with the cache to order workflow with things like EDI or API integrations. And on top of that, make that self-serviceable through a user-facing application to onboard, test, upgrade, maintain these connections, because that is a lot of work. And if you have to spend manual interactions on that, at our worldwide scale for thousands and thousands of external parties and vendors, that's a huge challenge. So that's where I'm coming from. And in the last year, I was lucky to be getting the chance to work on this exciting space with TeamViewer and the overall wearable AR logistics part of totally focusing on hands-free solutions visualized with assisted reality. And in that time, we already started approaching a couple of super interesting topics, which I hope we will touch on here and there today, to a point where we are looking very excited into 2025, what we're about to be able to improve, stabilize, and scale with existing and new customers and guys like you, obviously.
So in terms of the transition from your previous life in Amazon to TeamViewer, is there much of a crossover between the two, or was it a completely different career change for you when you went from Amazon to TeamViewer?
I mean, in terms of, let's say, professional scope, role, responsibilities, not so much. I'm a product manager here. I was a product manager technical at Amazon. There's a slight difference in definition, I'd say, in terms of how much is that technical scope, so to speak. The bigger difference is for sure, like coming from a company like Amazon, at that time when I left, going to a company that has 1,000, I don't even know how to say that in English, but it's 1,000 times bigger in terms of employees, Amazon versus TeamViewer. Coming from a US company to a German company, I was totally excited about that. Spent so much time in terms of working across so many time zones, typically CET to Pacific. So think -9 hours. That's not always a breeze. There's a lot of change, basically enjoying the occasional business meeting in German, which is refreshing. But yeah, other than that, it's more or less very fitting in terms of responsibilities and how you do and work as a product manager, for sure.
So everyone's got a different definition, I think, for this role, but to a completely non-technical person, somebody who's not in this industry at all, what exactly is the difference between a project manager and a product manager? Because I think certainly people get those words confused. And how, if somebody was to ask you, well, like I am doing now, how would you describe the role of a product manager? What is that to you?
Yeah. To start off, what I was mostly used to, and that is largely just time-wise shaped and formed by the experience and definition in the Amazon world. I typically dealt with roles like TPM or PM or PMT. So that's technical project manager, TPM, versus a product manager, technical. So that's how it was defined on that side. And the main difference there being, if you manage a project that's much more targeted towards coordination of delivery and dependencies, specifically going cross teams, cross organizations, tying all those together, being the go-to person, being able to influence and create impact and deliveries without having the authority to do so, because you're not the manager of all those teams. You're a stakeholder, a key stakeholder. You want something from those teams, and you need to be very aware of that and bring your best game in terms of convincing people, aligning people with the communication, etc. And that's where I'd say a strong transition or bridge is between a project manager and a product manager, because while as a product manager you have, I'd say, slightly more chance to have not necessarily authority, but more say in regards to what should or should not be done with certain, let's say, setups of teams and organizations. At the end of the day, it's still similar. If you can't convince your own team stakeholders, if that's product owners or the development teams themselves or the leads, etc., to work together across domains to achieve certain things, and that is certainly what I see in my current role, that it's rather I don't want to say fragmented, but it involves a bunch of teams that you need to work together. That is key. And that's, I'd say, the largest similarity. But the difference, I would say, is then if you think about day-to-day or, let's say, sprint-based or quarterly-based deliverables and the actual close tracking with the development teams and everything, that's where a project manager, or I would even throw in the product owner there, slightly in that direction, is typically much more closer with the development teams versus the product manager, who should take at least one or two steps back and look at the bigger picture and then choose wisely where and how to interact with those teams to provide the necessary perspective, vision, line of sight of what we are doing, and obviously the why. That's more or less my experience.
That makes sense. And I mean, I've got to ask this because I don't know about everyone else, but my front doorstep is just full of Amazon packages at the minute. It's that time of year, and we just had Black Friday finish, right? How crazy did things get at Amazon during that kind of run up to Christmas and the the whole Black Friday phenomenon? How much pressure did that put on the product groups, or was it very much in the ops team? Were you done by that point? Were you like, hey, my systems are up, let's just make them
good
touch, or were you still?
Good question. I do have very different experiences there, because one of the things I cherished and enjoyed a lot while working at Amazon for that amount of time was the ability to move between different responsibilities, teams, scopes, organizations, roles, etc. The majority of my experience was, as I said, with that business process automation. which in those times is powering all of the production traffic worldwide of all the orders going out, not customers necessarily, but mostly, let's say, to the backend. So our sourcing in and outbound. And there's still a lot happening in exactly those periods. So if anything goes wrong, we're in deep trouble, obviously, right? But typically all of the work that we did in that organization is to make sure that that runs smoothly, and that typically worked out like very, very well. Meaning in that org, in that role, it was kind of limited how much pressure or impact you see in the actual execution of these peak events. However, I also did work as a product manager towards the end of my time at Amazon in automated marketing. Again, a technical product manager for the automated systems that do run marketing campaigns, messages in all the different channels. That was quite a bit of different stories. So this was all hands on deck, war rooms. You have to be present around the clock, live monitoring of what goes out, what goes in. Very, very different. And also interesting to see, because if you talk to 5 guys that work at that company for that exact experience that you're looking for, George, you will find 5 different experiences for sure. For some, it's like really crazy madness and so much impact and pressure, and for others, barely any. So yeah, very wide range of, I think, what you can experience. But it's quite something.
It's nice to have. I guess it's nice to have experienced that and been in such a large organization to be able to try different roles.
Yes,
that must be nice. But I totally understand your point with time zones and not being necessarily in a global role. I mean, me and James probably still have that, right? But it's something that I think everyone should do once, right? I think it's very important to be able to work for different companies from different countries and understand those cultural perspectives and the different ethics that come with that. Cool. And I guess if we then, move into where you're at right now, right? Could we just talk about vision picking for a minute? We're very excited about vision picking, and we've seen some really interesting scaled up deployments with TeamViewer. It's obviously RealWear. Me and James have talked on the pod about doing remote expert and see what I see with video calling being a very primary use case for us. But vision picking is something that's coming through, and we're seeing more and more vision picking kind of deals come to the table, and companies actually really seeing the business value of vision picking. And you being a product manager in that space, can you just give me the holistic view of what vision picking is? Even if vision picking is the right word, maybe I'm not even describing it correctly because I'm no expert. I know our headsets are used, but I want to get probably that bigger picture, not just the RealWear experience of vision picking. Like if you can lift it up a bit for us and talk slightly more holistically, that would be really useful and interesting.
Absolutely. And like you already anticipated, obviously there's some details that you can look at or coin this or the other way. Personally, I do think the advantageous term is pick by vision, and that is, I mean, it's the same thing, but it provides any person that is coming into contact with this or that solution in the logistics space, simply makes it easier to compare, to understand analogies, parallel approaches, or consolidated approaches. And we have a lot of customers using solutions like pick by voice, pick by light. Some even refer to pick by scan. It's not that common, but in that sense, to me, it makes much more sense to think of it as pick by vision, because it just aligns these technologies and solutions easier, and then look what they do, how you can compare, and what's the benefits, right? So to try to lift this up to a higher perspective or view in terms of what that is and why we care about it and what we try to deliver here is a couple things. I think there's 2 most important topics and concepts to keep in mind. On the one hand, and that's not only true for our solution, but for any other solution like the ones I just mentioned, is we look at manual labor. in warehouses. It's humans, it's workers, it's frontline workers. That's why our solution is called overall frontline. It's people working in their day-to-day job, not sitting in front of a computer. They don't have a computer. They are at the front line. So they walk in logistics, they walk around a warehouse and execute tasks and process execution for things like picking or other processes. So that's basically our customers who use our solution. That's very important because in logistics, there's a lot of other processes that don't involve that much of human labor interaction. And we can talk about that maybe later as well. So that's the one part. And the other part is, how do you make it as enjoyable, as intuitive, and as a result, as effective as possible for that worker, that human operator, to get their job done? And how we approach it is, and double down on Pick by Vision, is by the use of hardware that is ideally head-mounted displays, that's smart glasses, and a software that allows to visualize at any given point, always in your field of view. Think like a back mirror in your car or a head-up display. It's always there, but it shouldn't be like in your face and you can't see around it, right? So that would be bad. But it needs to be there, it needs to be accessible. And to leverage a hardware opportunity like this by showing contextual information that is as helpful, as intuitive, and as quick to consume and operate and execute as possible, to bring those two together, the frontline worker that does not have a computer and that has a task to do. And it's a high-paced task. And at times it's even paid by performance, right? The quicker you are, the more you make. So it's very performance-driven. And obviously there's a need for both the warehouse operators or also the customer needs in terms of how much the volume changes, that is, increases year over year or season over season or changes. So how do you adapt to that? What's your solution to be successful there? And what we offer there with then Pick by Vision is that piece of software that runs there in combination with these glasses. So, I mean, we can maybe later on go into some more details there, but yeah.
Okay.
So,
I mean, historically though, so in a warehouse environment, a worker would have had a piece of paper. It would have been printed off, said you need 10 of this, 3 of this, 2 of these. There is a scale. I mean, I would say that is certainly the least technical version of that. I mean, I suppose even less technical would be handwritten as opposed to printed. Going to now, what I would say is the complete opposite of that. How much of a game changer is it to the frontline workers? Because, I mean, this is the Go HandsFree podcast. So your worker has gone from holding a piece of paper to wearing a headset, like a RealWear Navigator 520, and they're seeing, that was a small plug there, and you're seeing the thing you need to pick. For the worker, what does that mean for them?
I'd say multiple things. And I guess I also kind of need to be a bit careful on how many rabbit holes we go down to, because there's so much to talk about on so many details, and it might be less or more relevant.
We can always do a part 2. That's okay.
Okay. No worries. I'll try. So I'm always trying to not to go into too much detail there, but there's so many levels of changes and also improvements and opportunities for the specific worker. On like the most prominent one, I would say, is take the ambiguity out of what to do when and how, because there is opportunity with paper-based picking. And we've seen that with customers. Like, I want to say, ideally, we have customers moving from that kind of technology to ours, which is not always the case, but that's obviously where the biggest change in performance increase is. But what we've seen there with customers is also that tenure experience is like a huge deal with these processes, because if you look at a piece of paper and a larger list, you have to know how to most efficiently operate and execute that list. Like, where do you go first? How do you combine things? What do you keep in your head? Do you take notes? If you don't do that properly, this can be an extremely underwhelming result. However, if you are very experienced, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years in doing so, you'll rock that. Like, it's mind blowing at times how guys are able to operate these lists and these processes, but it's all in their head and it's their experience. And what we then do by bringing this onto a pick by vision solution with that omnipresent contextual information in your field of view, it's always just a glance away. It just takes out all of that ambiguity and also pressure to being able to optimize in your head how to do things, because the whole idea is there. Show step-by-step instructions. What are you supposed to do now? Possibly get a peek into the next half or full or 2 steps. That's all customizable, obviously, to whatever you want. So to just facilitate a seamless and efficient move of the worker throughout the warehouse to execute these steps, and always at a peace of mind that if you don't actively work against that solution, you have to want it. There's no way that you can go wrong or like drastically incur mistakes or something like that. So just do this. Oh, and then I have visual guidance of things like color coding, positioning, and numbers, and audio, and scanning, right? So it's a breeze. And the second improvement there is that basically it takes a lot of pressure off of the operator. And if you want to think like cognitive load, right? Think about that experienced worker. That's a high performance task to be able to do all of that optimization in their head. If they're not feeling well or up to task that day, that might show in the results. That's not true for a hands-free picking solution where you visualize all of that, which brings us to a very significant opportunity here is that also means if you have seasonal workers or strong seasonal changes in volume and throughput, and therefore need potentially temporary workers or seasonal workers, you can get them up to speed at a level of performance to that guy that has done that like 10 years, definitely in a day, less. And they'll comfortably do it. I mean, and I find
what's the value to the organization? You say, like seasonal shift work. We just talked about Black Friday. Clearly, these markets and warehouses have peaks and troughs in terms of throughput and demand. So, what's the business value? How do you position this to the organization that's parting cash for the solution? What do they actually get? And did you have any like hard data points or customer case studies that you can reference to say, we saved X company this? Is it an accuracy thing? Is it a pure efficiency thing? I mean, tell me a bit about the business metrics.
Absolutely. So, I mean, in terms of that onboarding seasonal workers, I'd say there's 2 perspectives or KPIs to keep in mind that matter a lot. One is how long does it take to train a new person to do their job, right? That you need right now that you didn't need 2 weeks ago because it wasn't Black Friday or just peak season, right? So how long does it take? And that there's an easy calculation, and we have those tools to calculate business cases with our customers there. Obviously, you need that time of that person, and you also need at the very least another person to do that training, for example, right? So that's already involving 2 people. And then the question is, what's the duration of that? And we are seeing onboarding times with customers that can reach from multiple days to multiple weeks. And even then, they are not necessarily at the same performance level as the rest of the workforce that have been doing that year round. That's the one part. And then the second part is, what's the resulting performance that you get out of a seasonal worker once they are productive and go running, doing their, let's say, picking processes, right? So what's the efficiency, the volume, and also the accuracy you get out of those operators doing that alongside your existing ones? And the lucky position that we have is that we play strong on both sides. So as an example, We have at the very least improvements in the onboarding time of like absolute minimum 60% cut down on onboarding time, all the way up to 90%.
Oh, wow.
That would mean things like if certain customers in their warehouses typically take a week or two to train their new employees and shadow them and do bodying up and see how that runs, to a sub 1 day onboarding.
Wow.
And then on the same day, you go picking. So that's very drastic in terms of time saving. And then on the resulting performance, what we see is at the very least a double-digit performance increase. So that's efficiency for the picking itself, all the way up to customers that we have that quote performance increases around 30%. So that's a 30. So
that's is compared to paper, or
these high numbers you typically don't see if, let's say, they come from a I don't know, tablet, handheld, or RF gun running some software where the worker operates that software. But I typically, with customers that start with a paper-based process, if I remember correctly, that would be an example of one of our customers with Global Foundries. They believe they quote 30% improvement, and they came from a paper-based picking. We have one of our largest customers, Coca-Cola Hellenic Bottling Company, with running around 1,500 pickers in over 30 warehouses with our solution. They coincidentally use your devices with the RealWear navigators, and they're a super interesting use case because of how exactly they do it in terms of, like, in my perspective, this is the true hands-free, because they really only use the smart glass and nothing else. Pretty interesting. We can talk a bit more about this.
Okay, so they're scanning using the camera?
Correct.
Then? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. And for them, they also came from a paper-based process. They only went as high as around 8% performance increase. So I was not 100% right when I said typically double digit, but I'd say that's an outlier. The reason is they optimized for accuracy. The reason being, any error is simply too costly for them to tolerate. So they were, from the business case, from the get-go, 100% focusing on a 99.99 accuracy while picking, because if you make any error, so what they're doing is they are picking mixed pallets of all the different beverages and bottles that you can imagine in the Coca-Cola company, and shipping individual pallets to individual customers through a truck. So that could be a shop on the corner that needs, I don't know, an assortment of different drinks. That's what those pickers do. And whenever there's one error on that pallet, the whole pallet needs to be returned and then done again. So, and this incurs so much cost. So that's why they went for that accuracy. They achieved that, and were kind of surprised, pleasantly surprised, to at the same time still increase by around 8% their picking experience, which is pretty great.
So what's the benefit?
That alone is not too bad.
If you're a customer who is coming from paper to hands-free, I mean, the benefit is obvious. You're just taking a technological leap forward.
Yeah.
But if you're coming from, like you mentioned, that some of your customers are coming from tablet-based solutions, what's the driver for them? Because they're already well on the technological journey.
I mean, I'd say well is always relative to the specific use case. How well is anything, or how good is anything? How well does it perform? There's such a huge range of possibilities on what that means and how that goes. So as one example, think of a bit more traditional, established, older interface like Telnet. So there's customers that might be fully digitalized, right? They run their pickers, their warehouse frontline workers on what we call RF guns. So this is something like a handheld with a grip that has a scanner built in, that has let's say a color display, and has a bunch of keys, maybe even like a keyboard kind of style. So they operate a software that has fairly limited visualization, but let's say it's what we call more like a mask-based approach. So it's more like entries and text, mostly text-based. And It works. It is directly connected with their WMS. It's all digitalized. They know exactly what's going on. They can in real time give this output to the workers and have them pick. But there's a couple of challenges there. On the one hand, obviously, if you operate that device in your hand, it's not hands-free. So you have to pick it up, put it down, look at it, take your other hand, go type, do stuff while you're not looking at your items. You're not picking. You're not going through your process. And the other is that with the example of Telnet and that mask-based approach, similar way also true for ITS Mobile as an interface, is you are basically exposing the worker to all that granularity and oftentimes unnecessary complexity and redundant steps to navigate through that UI, that system that runs in the backend. So you are showing, like, let's say, a bunch of masks and UI pages to the user, and okay, yeah, I don't need that, so next. Check, I don't need that, or just, yeah, I need to do that because the system says so. It's not pleasant, it's not efficient. What we can do here as an example, right, for these kind of customers, we do support direct Telnet integrations. We can run on top of that. We can then, for example, consolidate a variety of subsequent masks that are shown on that RF gun, for example, and make that accessible to, for example, one confirmation or command. And that in the backend, we will iterate through a couple of those pages. So what that means is you can, and the customer runs their exact same system as is on their side, right? So we just do the optimization on top of that. And to be frank, there's even others who do things like that, right? We're not the only ones, but what we like to do there is do that optimization on top of, for example, a Telnet integration, and in addition, make it hands-free, right, with a head-mounted display. So combine all of those with the customized workflow process that we are visualizing on the solution. So it's a mix, and there's huge opportunity for these kind of installations in customers. And possibly then to a lesser extent, it depends a bit, is if you might, I don't know, have maybe even an arm-mounted mobile device, like almost like a mobile phone factor that shows a software, what are you supposed to do, and then maybe use a scanner inside, or you use an additional wearable scanner. But still, the question is, how much do you spend on operating these devices on the one hand, and on the second hand, how much customized and tailored to your process is the software and the process running there? And that's where basically our solution plays strong in terms of providing a very customized, tailored solution on the execution, so to speak.
Makes sense. And the hardware, I mean, from your perspective, the hardware landscape, right? Obviously, smart glasses or wearable devices are a relatively new concept. They're obviously improving all the time. We see the market expanding. But you know, what do you see like how far is this going to go? Because we've all seen pictures of Elon Musk's robots and other, you know, humanoid technologies that effectively are running things fully automated. I mean, how far are we between these two worlds? Because obviously, smart glasses is about giving humans that bit more, creating a little bit more efficiency and accuracy. And how far until robotics take over completely? And you know, what does that next 20, 30 years look like from your perspective in the warehouse?
I mean, big question. I don't have the answer for that. Luckily, and that's what I like about my position and the scope that we work in together with manufacturers for devices that can help us here with the smart glasses, is I don't need to have that answer right now. Simple reason being, as long as we have manually operated tasks and human workers in the warehouse executing tasks around logistics, being surrounded and facilitated and accompanied by automated system like a goods to person or an automated storage and retrieval system, and whatever kind of robot you can imagine, or an auto store system. And we have lots of these kind of customer use cases where all of that is happening, and it needs to happen. But at some point, these things come just much more efficiently, for example, to a person that is supposed to do something with that, right? And that's where we connect. And as long as that is a case, and it is a use case for sure right now and in the foreseeable future, I'm not saying this will be there forever. That's not a sure thing, right? But on the upside, on a hands-free, supported, visually guided solution that can be deployed and put into work right now, right? There's no need to wait. So, and that's the other thing that we experience when we showcase this together with you, for example, on our trade show booths, etc. This is nothing like, in quotes, new in that sense that we are trying to test this out or validating if and how it works. This is all proven. Like, we've been doing this for 7-8+ years, and we have customers like DHL, for example, in the US. It's also 1,500 pickers alone across, it's between 20 and 30 warehouses. They've been a customer of ours, I believe, since 2017 with smart glasses, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at is, this is what you can do right now and into the foreseeable future, improving your manual labor in the warehouse operations across all possible processes. We always start with picking. That's where most of the workers are. But by the nature of how this solution together with the hardware works, at the end of the day, it is, like, I want to say simply, a step-by-step process execution, meaning any process that you have in your warehouse where a human needs to operate that process can be solved with that solution, right? So it's also a good way to scale and make more use for a customer of that deployed solution as they go, right? Start with the biggest business case and then see how that can develop. And in that sense, I think I'm in the lucky position to be, I don't know if relaxed is the right word, but I'm sitting here. I'm happy with what we can offer and how we can even iterate and improve as we go, on catering to the needs of the human workforce and the doing human labor in the warehouses in the next years. And it works beautifully together with a lot of other complex and automated systems.
Oh, nice. Oh,
Yeah.
that's really,
you mentioned some of those complex automated systems. You know, you've got partnerships with the likes of SAP and Manhattan Associates, right? Those kind of companies that, you know, that provides a perfect platform to be able to integrate to. You know, we've done a lot of work collectively on some of those, so we really understand and I guess appreciate you coming on and sharing all this insight, Helmar. I think, to be honest, there's probably that much to do. We might even need to do a part 2.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I think there's so much more we could talk about on this. And maybe we could even bring some live demos into it. I think that'd be pretty cool to actually showcase definitely some of the tech. So maybe we should do a stay tuned and do a follow-up session on this. But yeah, James, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add before we wrap up. But
no, that's great. No, Helmar, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us about this. And George, you're absolutely right. There's plenty of content for a part 2. So in the new year, we'd love to invite you back and talk about this in a bit more detail.
Cool. Yeah, happy to do that. Thanks a lot for having me, guys.
All right. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Well, that was a very good chat, James.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very insightful. We could have talked for ages, actually. That could have gone on so much further.
Maybe we need episode 2. We definitely, if anyone wants to come on the pod, feel free to drop us a note on LinkedIn or wherever you can contact us. But yeah, I mean that's super interesting, and you know, I think warehousing and picking's becoming such an incredible use case for wearable technology, right?
Yeah,
it was great to hear from Helmar. We definitely could have gone a lot longer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's maybe a theme that because we had that with Chris as well, that we could have comfortably done a part 2. So maybe we should ask all of our guests to reserve some time.
Oh. There's a new year coming, so we should definitely have a few extra awesome episode 2s. And again, you've always got to do your...
Yeah, I've got to do my thing. So, yep, thank you, everybody, for listening and making it to the end. Very grateful. Please subscribe, like, rate, do all the things. As you know, we're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and a few other places. So, yep, stay tuned for the next episode of Go Hands Free.